The door slams shut. Not gently. Not like a normal door. It crashes like a warning. A loud metal boom echoes down the hallway, shaking the air like thunder. Inside, the lights flicker. 1 second bright. Next second dim. Then bright again. A correction officer stands frozen in place, gripping his radio so tight his knuckles turn white. His breathing is heavy. Fast. Panic breathing. Because something is wrong. Something is very wrong. Down the corridor, behind another steel door, there's screaming. Not one voice. Not two. A whole group. It sounds like chaos trapped inside concrete walls. Then suddenly, silence. Not calm silence. The kind of silence that feels like the building is holding its breath. The officer presses the radio button. His voice shakes. Central. I need backup. Right now. Only static answers him. Just harsh crackling noise. Like the radio is dead. Or like nobody is listening. He tries again. Central, do you copy? We've got a situation. Still nothing. Then footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Not officer boots. Too many steps. Too close. The officer turns his head slowly toward the corner of the hallway. And his eyes widen. Because a group of inmates is walking toward him. Not running. Not shouting. Just walking. Come. Like they already know something he doesn't. Like they already know the rules don't matter anymore. One of them smiles. Not a friendly smile. A cold one. A smile that says, "You're trapped here with us." The officer takes 1 step back. His back hits the locked door. Nowhere to go. And then one inmate says quietly, "Officer, you lost?" The officer's radio falls from his hand and hits the floor. Clack. And in that moment, it becomes clear. This isn't a prison under control. This is a prison slipping into something else. Something darker. Something lawless. Something the city of New York may no longer be able to fix. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who'd find it interesting. The island nobody talks about. Rikers Island sits in the shadow of New York City. Planes fly over it every day. Cars rush past it. People live their lives just a few miles away. But most New Yorkers never go there. They don't talk about it. They don't want to. Because Rikers isn't just a jail. It's a world hidden behind fences, water, and locked steel gates. A place where time feels different. Where fear becomes normal. And where control is supposed to be everything. For decades, Rikers Island was known as one of the most dangerous jail systems in America. Not because of one big riot. Not because of one famous escape. But because of something worse. A slow collapse. A system cracking from the inside. And nobody outside wanted to look too closely. Because if they did, they might realize something terrifying. That New York City's biggest jail wasn't just holding criminals. It was becoming something the city couldn't control anymore. A jail built like a machine. Rikers Island isn't one building. It's a massive complex. Multiple facilities. Multiple units. Thousands of inmates. Thousands of workers. All packed onto one isolated piece of land. Surrounded by water. And protected by the idea that nobody gets out unless the system allows it. But the truth is, Rikers is not built like a modern prison. It's old. Worn down. Cold. The walls are stained. The floors are chipped. The doors groan when they open. And when they close, they sound like a coffin sealing shut. Every hallway smells like sweat, bleach, and old metal. The air feels heavy. Like it's been trapped there for years. And inside those walls, tension never sleeps. The officers who stopped feeling safe. At the start of every shift, correction officers arrive like soldiers. Some look tired. Some look angry. Some look numb. They check their belts. They check their radios. They check their keys. And they tell themselves the same lie every day. I'll make it through this shift. Because inside Rikers, even officers don't feel like the powerful ones. Not anymore. Many of them have seen things they don't talk about. Inmates fighting over nothing. Stabbings with homemade weapons. Officers getting jumped in blind corners. Doors getting jammed. Units locking down for hours. And most terrifying of all, officers calling for backup. And nobody coming fast enough. That's when the fear really hits. Because if backup doesn't come, then the uniform means nothing. The badge means nothing. And the law means nothing. The inmates who learn the system's weakness. Inside Rikers, inmates watch everything. They learn patterns. They study guards. They know who is new. They know who is scared. They know which doors don't lock right. They know which cameras don't work. And they know one thing more than anything else. The staff is overwhelmed. Then the inmates control the island. Not officially. Not on paper. But in reality. And reality is what matters most inside those walls. Rikers is filled with people waiting for trial. Some guilty. Some not. Some young. Some hardened. Some mentally ill. Some desperate. And when you pack that many unstable lives into one place, pressure builds. Like a bomb. A city that started looking away. New York City is loud. Busy. Fast. People worry about rent. Or traffic. Crime in the streets. But Rikers? That's out of sight. Out of mind. Until something happens. Until a scandal hits the news. Until someone dies. Until a video leaks. Then people get angry for a week. They demand change. Politicians make speeches. Promises get made. And then, New York goes back to being New York. And Rikers goes back to being Rikers. A forgotten island of concrete and cages. But behind the scenes, the system was cracking wider. The staffing crisis that broke everything. Then came the staff shortages. Officers called in sick. Officers quit. Some didn't feel safe anymore. Some were exhausted. Some were angry at the city. Some felt abandoned by leadership. And the fewer officers there were, the more power shifted. The units became harder to control. Fights became more common. Lockdowns became longer. And when inmates realized officers couldn't respond quickly, something changed. The fear moved. It didn't live only in the cells anymore. It moved into the control rooms. It moved into the hallways. It moved into the minds of the people who were supposed to run the place. So, even a normal day started to feel like the start of a disaster. A single night that showed the truth. One night, deep inside one of Rikers' housing units, something happened. It wasn't the biggest incident in history. It wasn't a Hollywood prison riot. It was smaller. But it exposed something far more dangerous. A quiet moment. A small shift. That showed the entire system was losing control. An officer was doing his rounds. Just routine. Just checking doors. Counting heads. Listening for trouble. Then he heard a sound. A sharp banging. Not random. Not playful. Like someone was trying to send a message through the walls. Then another sound. A door buzzed. But it didn't open. It should have opened. But it didn't. The officer frowned and looked at the panel. The light was blinking. Red. Then green. Then red again. Like the lock was confused. Like the system itself was malfunctioning. He tried the radio. Control, this is Unit C. Door isn't responding. Static. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. And then the banging stopped. Silence again. The officer stood still. He could hear his own breathing. Then from inside the unit, a voice called out. Come. Almost friendly. Officer. The officer turned slowly toward the cell door. And the voice said, We're not locked in tonight. The officer's face tightened. He walked closer, careful, quiet. He looked through the small glass window. And what he saw made his stomach drop. The inmates weren't in their bunks. They weren't sleeping. They were standing together. All of them. Like they were waiting. Like they were organized. Like they had planned something. And then one of them stepped forward. And held up something in his hand. A set of keys. Officer keys. Real keys. The inmate smiled and said, You want to know what's crazy? The officer didn't answer. He couldn't. The inmate leaned closer to the glass and whispered, We didn't steal these. He paused. Then said the words that made the officer's blood run cold. Somebody gave them to us. The officer stepped back. His heart pounding. Because that meant only one thing. This wasn't just inmates being violent. This wasn't just staff being overwhelmed. This meant something worse. It meant the jail was rotting from the inside. And the people running it might not even know who they can trust anymore. The officer grabbed his radio again. Pressed the button hard. Central. I need immediate response. Keys are missing. Static. Still static. And then, the hallway lights flickered again. And behind him, he heard the sound of a door unlocking. A door that should have never opened. He turned around slowly. And saw a steel gate swinging wide. Not forced. Not broken. Just opening like someone had control. And in that moment the officer realized, Rikers wasn't just losing control. Rikers was already out of control. And whoever was pulling the strings was still hidden in the dark. The night the rules broke, short version. The officer couldn't move. His back pressed against the cold wall. The inmates kept walking toward him, slow and calm like they had all the time in the world. His radio crackled in his hand. He pressed the button again. Central. I need backup now. Static. Nothing. No voice. No help. One inmate stepped forward and lifted a ring of keys. Real correction keys. They jingled softly. And that sound alone felt like a gun being loaded. The officer's eyes widened. Because keys meant only one thing. Someone on the inside had helped them. Then he noticed something else. The camera above the hallway was dead. No blinking light. No recording. No proof. The inmate smiled. No cameras, he whispered. The officer swallowed hard. No backup. He leaned closer. And no way out. The locks start failing. Suddenly, click. A door lock released somewhere behind them. Then another. Click. Then another. Click. The officer's body stiffened. Because that sound wasn't normal. Those locks weren't supposed to open. Then the loudspeaker came on. A calm voice announced, "Attention all units. We are experiencing a temporary system issue." Temporary system issue. That was a polite way of saying the jail's locks were failing. The inmates heard it too. And their faces changed. Not panic. Not fear. Excitement. Like animals hearing a cage door unlock. The island wakes up. From deep inside the housing unit, shouting exploded. Then banging. Metal hitting metal. Feet running. And then a chant rose through the building like a wave. "Open it up. Open it up. Open it up." The officer looked around. More inmates poured into the hallway. Not 10. Not 20. Dozens. Then more. The lead inmate turned to him and spoke calmly. "Tonight, the island belongs to us." The officer tried stepping back. But someone blocked him. Another inmate. Then another. Closing him in. The worst part. The officer turned toward the open gate. The one that should have been locked. And in the shadows he saw it. A correction officer standing there. Watching. Not helping. Not calling it in. Just watching like it was planned. Then the shadow officer turned. And walked away. Leaving the gate open. Leaving the officer trapped. Police car light. End of chapter 2 cliffhanger. Then the radio on the officer's belt finally came alive. A voice whispered through the static. Not Central. Not dispatch. A stranger. And the stranger said, "You need to move, right now." The officer froze. The voice continued, "Because the next door that opens." A loud click echoed behind him. A heavy steel lock disengaging. The officer turned slowly. And the voice finished. "Holds the most violent men on this island." The door behind him began to open. Creak. And a deep laugh came from the darkness inside. Then footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming closer. And the officer realized, whatever was coming out wasn't joining the riot. It was taking control of it. The men they couldn't control. The steel door opened wider. Slow. Heavy. Like it didn't want to open at all. The hallway air turned colder. The officer stood frozen, staring into the darkness. Then he heard it again. A laugh. Not excited. Not crazy. A laugh that sounded calm. Like someone who had been waiting for this moment. The footsteps came next. Slow. Heavy. Each step echoed off the concrete walls. The inmates around the officer backed away slightly. Even they looked nervous. That was the terrifying part. If the inmates were scared, then whoever was coming out of that door was worse. The officer's throat tightened. His hands trembled. And then a man stepped into the hallway. Tall. Broad shoulders. Face covered in shadows. His eyes looked empty. Like he didn't feel fear anymore. Like he didn't feel anything. He looked around at the crowd of inmates. Then he looked at the officer. And he smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was the smile of someone who knows the rules don't apply to him. He spoke softly. "Y'all really opened this door?" Nobody answered. The hallway stayed silent. The man stepped forward again. Behind him, more figures appeared. Not one. Not two. 5, 6. Men with hard faces and slow movements. Men who didn't rush. Men who didn't need to. The lead man looked at the inmates holding the keys. "You boys think you running something tonight?" One inmate tried to act brave. "We got control now." The man laughed again. Then he shook his head. "No." He stepped closer. And the inmates moved back. Even the ones who were acting tough. Because they could feel it. This wasn't just another inmate. This was the kind of man Rikers was built to contain. And he was free. The officer realizes the truth. The officer glanced toward the gate. Still open. Still unguarded. Still no backup. He looked down at his radio. It was useless. His heart pounded harder. Because now he understood something. This wasn't a random failure. This wasn't just a system issue. This was a chain reaction. A perfect storm. And Rikers Island was becoming a battlefield. Not between officers and inmates, but between inmates themselves. Because on Rikers, when power disappears, someone always takes it. And the men stepping out of that door? They weren't here to escape. They were here to rule. The new leader takes over. The lead man walked straight up to the inmate holding the keys. The key holder swallowed hard. His confidence was gone. The lead man stared at him for a long moment, then calmly reached out and took the keys. No fight. No argument. The inmate didn't even resist. The lead man held the keys in his palm and nodded. That's better. Then he turned and looked at the hallway. He pointed down the corridor. First thing we do. He paused. We shut this whole island down. One of the men behind him asked quietly. What about the officers? The lead man looked at the trapped correction officer. Then he shrugged. Depends. The officer's stomach dropped. Depends? That was worse than a threat. Because it meant the officer's life wasn't even important enough to decide yet. The alarm that never sounded. The officer waited for the jail's emergency alarms. Any second now. Any second the system would wake up. But nothing happened. No sirens. No flashing lights. No lockdown. Just silence. And footsteps. More footsteps. The sound of inmates spreading through the unit. The officer could hear distant yelling. Doors slamming. Metal banging. The entire building was waking up. Like an animal breaking free from its cage. The lead man lifted the radio from the officer's belt. The officer flinched. The man pressed the button. And spoke into it calmly. Control, this is housing 4. Static. A voice answered. A real voice. Weak and shaking. H housing 4, who is this? The lead man smiled. Then he said something that made the officer's blood run cold. This is the island now. Police car light end of chapter 3 cliffhanger. The voice on the radio panicked. What do you want? The lead man looked around at the inmates. Then he looked at the officer. And he spoke softly into the radio. We want the bridge. The officer's eyes widened. The bridge. The only way off Rikers Island. The only connection to New York City. The radio voice shouted. You can't get to the bridge. It's guarded. The lead man smiled wider. Then he turned to one of his men. And nodded. The man pulled out a folded paper. A map. A staff map. With routes highlighted. The officer's face went pale. Because only staff had maps like that. Meaning the betrayal went deeper than anyone knew. The lead man spoke into the radio one last time. Tell the city? He paused. Rikers is coming. Then he dropped the radio. And the hallway erupted with movement. Inmates running. Doors opening. The island shaking awake. And the officer realized. New York City had no idea what was about to hit them. The bridge to New York, final/short version. The word bridge spread through the jail like fire. Suddenly the chaos didn't feel random anymore. It felt planned. The officer watched inmates move down the corridor in groups. Not running wild. Moving like they had orders. Some held stolen radios. Some carried keys. Some even wore stolen officer jackets. And for the first time the officer understood something terrifying. This wasn't a riot. This was a takeover. The only way off the island. Rikers is surrounded by water. There's only one real way in or out. The bridge. That bridge is more than a road. It's the lifeline. Supplies. Staff. Ambulances. Everything goes through it. And if inmates reached that bridge, New York City would have a nightmare it could never hide. The leader walked ahead like a man who owned the island. His eyes stayed calm. Cold. Like he had already accepted what was about to happen. The gate that should never open. At the outer checkpoint, a heavy steel gate blocked the path to the bridge. Officers stood there, tense and shaking, waiting for help. But help didn't come. The leader stopped in front of the gate and nodded. A man beside him pulled out staff keys. The officer's heart dropped. Because the keys weren't stolen. They were official. The lock clicked. The gate opened. And cold night air rushed inside. The bridge lights glowed in the distance. New York City was right there. So close. So unaware. The city finally wakes up. Far away, sirens began to rise. Then louder. Then closer. Helicopters could be heard cutting through the sky. Spotlights started sweeping across the water. The leader stepped toward the bridge. Then paused. He looked back at the dark prison behind him. And smiled like a man making history. Then he said quietly. They should have listened. The blackout. Suddenly, the island lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then everything went out. Total darkness. No cameras. No alarms. No control. Rikers Island became a black hole. A silent island filled with moving shadows. The officer felt sick. Because now nobody could see what was happening. And nobody could prove what was happening. Police car light end of final chapter. Ending cliffhanger style. The helicopters hovered overhead. Spotlights searched. NYPD voices shouted orders through loudspeakers. But on the bridge, the inmates didn't run forward. They stepped backward. One by one. Vanishing into the darkness of the island. Not escaping. Not surrendering. Hiding. Like predators returning to their den. Then the officer's radio crackled. Central's voice came through shaking. "Officer, do you copy?" The officer grabbed it fast. "Yes, I copy." Central paused. Then asked the question that proved the city had no control at all. "How many inmates got out?" The officer stared into the pitch-black island. He couldn't see the gates. He couldn't see the yard. He couldn't see the shadows moving. He swallowed hard. And whispered, I don't know." Then deep inside Rikers, a loud metal slam echoed through the darkness. Bang. Like the island was locking itself again. Not to keep inmates inside, but to keep the city out. And the officer realized the truth. Rikers didn't need to escape, because Rikers was already free. Clapperboard Outro, final documentary close plus CTA. Rikers Island isn't just a jail. It's a warning. Because when a system breaks down slowly, people don't notice at first. Not until the doors stop locking. Not until the radios stop answering. Not until the island goes dark. And by then, it's already too late. New York City may still call it a correctional facility. But what happens when the people inside stop believing in correction? What happens when fear becomes power? And the island starts making its own rules? That's the real question. And that's why Rikers isn't just losing control. Rikers is becoming control. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Also, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us honestly, do you think New York can still regain control of Rikers Island? Or is it already beyond saving? Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous place in a city is the place the city tries hardest to ignore.